My mother refused to help with my husband's emergency surgery, saying, "He's married in, not blood," just weeks after spending a fortune on my brother's wedding. So, at a family dinner, I made one simple financial observation that exposed her hypocrisy and set in motion a collapse she never saw coming. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The sterile, chemical smell of the hospital waiting room was starting to seep into my clothes. I sat under the buzzing fluorescent lights, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles were white. My husband, Nathan, was in surgery. It was supposed to be a simple appendectomy, a routine procedure, but it wasn't. The surgeon had come out an hour ago, his face grim, to explain that they found extensive complications. An abscess had ruptured. He was septic. The words emergency, complex, and critical echoed in the silence of my mind. I was running on 36 hours of no sleep, my entire body thrumming with a toxic cocktail of caffeine and terror. My job as a financial analyst meant I was good at calculating risk, but this wasn't a spreadsheet. This was the man I loved. My phone buzzed on the plastic seat beside me. I snatched it up, desperate for a distraction, maybe a word of support. It was a group text from my mother, Rebecca. My thumb fumbled with the screen, opening it to a string of photos. My brother, Dominic, and his new wife were posing on a balcony overlooking the ocean. The photos were professionally done, gleaming with a post-honeymoon glow. Then came the messages from Mom. "Isn't this just perfect? Dominic says the 5-star resort in Bali is everything I promised him it would be. All paid for, of course. He deserves it." Another photo pinged through, this one of a receipt for a pair of designer watches. My mother's caption, "There's something special, wedding gift from me and Max. You only get one wedding like this." I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. The price tag on the watches alone would have covered our entire insurance deductible. The cost of that Bali honeymoon could have covered half of the projected hospital bill I was currently staring at on a crumpled intake form. Just 3 weeks ago, my parents, Max and Rebecca, had thrown Dominic a wedding that cost more than my house. They'd flown in orchids from Hawaii, hired a celebrity chef, and boasted to everyone about the no-expense-spared celebration for their precious son. Meanwhile, I was here, in a public hospital waiting room, trying to figure out if Nathan's insurance would cover a second, more complex operation. A cold, hard knot of dread was forming in my stomach, separate from the fear for Nathan's life. This was a financial dread, a sickening realization that we were on our own. I had to try. My hands were shaking as I dialed her number. She picked up on the second ring, her voice bright and breezy. "Lydia, did you see the photos? Isn't he handsome?" "Mom," I said, my voice cracking. "I'm at the hospital. It's Nathan." The line went quiet. I heard her sigh, a sound of pure inconvenience. "Oh, is he all right? Did he hurt his back again at that messy construction site?" Nathan was an architect, not a day laborer, but my mother always referred to his work with disdain. "No, Mom, it's bad. He had an appendectomy, but it was ruptured. He has sepsis. They're in surgery right now, and it's not good." "Oh dear. Well, these things happen," she said, her tone utterly detached. "Send him my best. I have to run. Dominic is about to call." "Mom, wait," I interrupted, the word tearing from my throat. "I need help. The insurance, it's not going to cover all of this. They're talking about specialized care, a long recovery. We don't have this kind of money right now. We just put our savings into his new firm." The silence that followed was heavy and cold. "Lydia," she finally said, her voice stripped of all its earlier warmth, "you are a financial analyst. Surely you planned for an emergency." "Not for this, not for tens of thousands of dollars you just spent. You just spent so much on the wedding. I thought maybe you and Dad could help us. Alone, even, just to get us through this." I heard her take a sharp breath. "Lydia, I'm going to stop you right there. Your father and I helped Dominic with his wedding. That is a family celebration, a joyful milestone. This is a private medical issue. Nathan is your husband. He's married in, not blood. It's your responsibility, not ours." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Not blood. "He's your son-in-law," I whispered, tasting ash. "He's family." "It's not the same, and you know it. We have to protect our family's assets for our family. Dominic will have children, and we need to think of the future." I am sorry, Lydia, but our hands are tied. The line clicked. She had hung up. I sat there, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. The buzzing of the lights above me seemed to grow louder until it was a deafening roar. In that moment, staring at the photo of my brother's 5-star honeymoon, a cold, quiet clarity settled over me. The fear for Nathan was still there, a raging fire in my chest, but beside it, a new, harder emotion was being forged: resolve. My mother had just drawn a line in the sand, separating blood from family. She had no idea that I, her daughter, the financial analyst who managed her own numbers, also had access to their numbers. The betrayal was worse than the financial abandonment. It was the casual, cruel dismissal of the man I loved. The next 48 hours were a blur of antiseptic smells, hushed conversations with doctors, and the rhythmic beeping of machines. Nathan made it through the second surgery. He was stable, but weak, and the road ahead was going to be long. The surgeon explained that the sepsis had done more damage than they thought. He would be out of work for months, not weeks. As an architect just launching his own small firm, if he wasn't working, there was no income. The financial weight settled on my shoulders, heavy as a lead blanket. I finally left the hospital to go home, shower, and grab my laptop. I needed to start moving money, liquidating what few assets we had, and applying for a high-interest medical loan. As I walked into our quiet, empty apartment, the silence was overwhelming. I saw Nathan's drafting table by the window, a half-finished blueprint pinned to it. I traced the lines of the design with my finger, a wave of anger so potent it made me dizzy. My phone rang. It was my father, Max. A small, naive part of me flickered with hope. My father was the enabler, the wallet behind my mother's whims, but he was a softer man. Maybe he would understand. "Lydia," he said, his voice gruff. "Your mother told me about Nathan. Tough break." "Hi, Dad. Yeah, it's been rough." "Listen, sweetheart, I know you called your mother about money." He cleared his throat, a sound I recognized. This was the speech my mother had fed him. "We just can't, Lydia. We're overextended. The wedding, Dominic's new business venture. It all adds up. We're tapped out." Tapped out? My father's construction firm had just landed the city's new library contract, a deal worth millions. The lie was so lazy, so insulting, it took my breath away. "Tapped out," I repeated, my voice flat. "That's right, so you'll have to be resourceful. You're smart, Lydia. You'll figure it out." He was trying to sound encouraging, like a father teaching his kid to ride a bike. "Right," I said. The line was clear, the wall was up. "I understand. Thanks for calling, Dad." I hung up and opened my laptop. I wasn't just a financial analyst. For the last 5 years, at my father's request, I had been the one who managed my parents' personal investment portfolio. I was the one who set up their trusts, who filed their quarterly reports, who balanced the complex web of assets that funded their lavish lifestyle. My mother, the interior designer, thought she managed the family's social standing, and my father, the businessman, thought he managed the firm. But I was the one who managed the actual liquid wealth. I did it for free, of course, for family. I logged into the secure portal. I wasn't going to steal from them. I wasn't going to do anything illegal. I was just going to look. I was going to see exactly how tapped out they really were. The numbers loaded on the screen. Columns of assets, recent transactions, account balances. And there it was. The wedding. The wire transfers to vendors, the resort in Bali, the charge from the high-end jeweler. It was all there, a staggering sum, but that wasn't what caught my eye. It was a different line item. A repeating transfer, one I had set up myself years ago but had forgotten about. a monthly deposit into a trust account, an account I hadn't looked at in ages. An account that, I suddenly realized, had my name on it. I clicked it open. The balance was significant. It was a trust my grandfather had set up for me and Dominic to be paid out on his 70th birthday. But my father, in a moment of rare foresight after his business took off, had started funding it aggressively as a form of legacy planning. A tax shelter, really. I had set up the automatic transfers from his business account to this trust and forgotten. But they hadn't. My eyes scanned the transaction history. I saw the automatic monthly deposits, but then I saw something else, something recent, a withdrawal, a very large withdrawal. It was dated just 2 days before Dominic's wedding. A cold, tingling sensation started in my fingers and spread up my arms. The trust was structured to require 2 signatures for any early withdrawal. The trustee, my Faye, R, and the beneficiary, me. I had never signed anything. I looked closer. A scanned copy of the withdrawal form was attached. There was my father's signature, and next to it, a forgery of my own. It was a good one, but it wasn't mine. The loop on the L was too round. They hadn't just refused to help me. They had stolen from me. I leaned back in my chair, the hospital's sterile smell still clinging to me. The betrayal was so complete, so audacious, it was almost stunning. My mother's words echoed in my head. He's married in, not blood. They had forgotten one crucial thing. I was blood, and I was the one who knew where every single penny was buried. My mother, Rebecca, always lived by a simple code. Appearance is reality. Our childhood home wasn't just a house. It was a portfolio piece for her interior design business. A business that, as far as I could tell, consisted of endlessly redecorating her own home and my father's office. She was a woman built of sharp angles and expensive perfume, her kindness reserved exclusively for those who could elevate her social standing. I was a disappointment in that regard. I was quiet, good with numbers, and had no interest in her world of charity galas and country club politics. I went to a state school, got a practical degree, and married a man who worked with his hands. Nathan, an architect with a love for sustainable design and sawdust, was everything she wasn't: genuine, humble, and unimpressed by wealth. She despised him for it. Dominic, however, was her masterpiece. He was 2 years younger, effortlessly charming, and had his mother's expensive tastes. He'd skated through a private university on my father's dime, and his entrepreneurial career was a string of failed startups, each one quietly funded by a loan from my father, Max. Dominic was my mother's perfect accessory. He looked the part, he said the right things, and he reflected her perfect family back to the world. My entire life, I had been the one to sacrifice. I was the responsible one. When my father's firm almost went under during the 2008 recession, I was the one, fresh out of college, who spent 6 months rebuilding his accounting from the ground up, finding the creative but legal loopholes that saved his company. When my grandfather got sick, I was the one who managed his end-of-life care, the medical bills, and the estate. Dominic was too busy finding himself in Thailand. I did it all without complaint because that was my role. Lydia, the reliable, invisible daughter. And now, they had stolen from me to fund Dominic's perfect life. The new person in this equation was Dominic's wife, a woman perfectly cast by my mother. I'd only met her a few times before the wedding. She was polished, with a blindingly white smile and a resume that seemed to consist entirely of influencing. Her interest in our family was specific. At a pre-wedding dinner, she had cornered me, her eyes scanning my simple dress. "Lydia, right? You're the numbers one," she'd said, sipping her champagne. "Dominic tells me your dad's firm is just massive. It must be so comforting to know your future is all set." "My future is my own, thanks," I'd replied coolly. "I have a career." "Oh, that's sweet," she'd smiled, a flash of something hard in her eyes. "But I mean family assets. It's all about legacy, isn't it? Protecting the bloodline." Bloodline, there was that word again. It wasn't a coincidence. It was the family mantra, whispered by my mother and now parroted by her new protégé. Now, sitting at my kitchen table, the forged signature burning a hole in my screen, it all clicked into place. This wasn't just about my mother favoring my brother. This was a calculated, long-term strategy to consolidate the family wealth, cutting me and my married-in husband out entirely. My refusal to help was the appetizer. The theft from my trust was the main course. They saw me as a quiet utility, the sensible daughter who would never make a fuss, who would just absorb the blow and figure it out, as my father had said. They assumed I was too timid, too beaten down by my current crisis, to fight back. They had mistaken my quiet competence for weakness. A new, cold energy surged through me. This was no longer just about the money for Nathan's bills. This was about the decades of being sidelined, of being used, of being treated as secondary. This was about the blatant, criminal theft. My mother's voice, "He's not blood," was the catalyst. She had no idea the war she had just declared. My first call was not to a lawyer. It was to Nathan's surgeon. I used our emergency credit card, the one with the predatory interest rate, to pay the deposit for the next phase of his care. He was my priority. Only when I knew he was safe and scheduled for the necessary follow-ups did I allow myself to shift gears. I was a financial analyst. My entire career was built on finding irregularities. This wasn't just a family dispute. It was fraud. The clever trap was already in my possession. It was the portfolio itself. For 5 years, I had been the unpaid manager of their wealth. I had access to everything, every brokerage account, every tax return, every property deed, and every private loan to Dominic. My father, trusting his numbers girl, had given me the keys to the kingdom. My mother, too focused on the results of the wealth, had never bothered to understand the source. I opened a new, encrypted file on my hard drive. I began to pull records. First, the trust. I downloaded the forged withdrawal slip. That was my silver bullet, but it wasn't enough. I didn't just want the money back, I wanted them to understand what they had done. I needed leverage. I dug into my father's business accounts, the ones I had helped him set up. I cross-referenced the dates of Dominic's failed startups with massive, unexplained consulting fees paid from my father's company. It was classic tax evasion, funneling business profits to his son disguised as expenses. It was sloppy, arrogant, and highly illegal. I downloaded the invoices, vague, unprofessional, and all approved by my father, Max. Next, I looked at the wedding. My mother had bragged it was all paid for. A lie. I found the loan agreements. My father had taken a massive business loan, collateralized against company equipment, to pay for the orchids and the celebrity chef. He was risking his employees' livelihoods for my brother's party. The more I dug, the angrier I became. The family assets my mother was so keen to protect for her bloodline were a house of cards built on my unpaid labor, my stolen trust fund, and my father's reckless business practices. I compiled everything into a neat, password-protected folder. I had the forged signature. I had the proof of tax evasion. I had the details of the irresponsible business loan. I then hired a forensic accountant, an old colleague I trusted implicitly. I didn't tell him the whole story, just that I was handling a hostile internal audit for a client and needed a third-party opinion on a specific signature and a series of transactions. "Lydia," he called me back 2 days later, his voice all business. "This is a mess. The signature on the trust withdrawal is a clear forgery. Any bank's legal team would spot it in a second. And these consulting fees," he whistled. "This isn't just bad bookkeeping. This is wire fraud, plain and simple. Whoever this client is, they are in a world of trouble." "Thank you," I said, my voice steady. "That's exactly what I needed to hear." I hung up. The pieces were in place. I had the proof. I had the professional validation. All I needed was the right moment. It came a week later. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother, Rebecca. "Family dinner at the club on Saturday. Your father has a wonderful announcement about Dominic. Be there. And please, Lydia, try to look presentable. No hospital scrubs." I was still wearing the same jeans I'd had on for 2 days. Nathan was finally home, sleeping in our bed, but he was a shadow of himself. The medical bills were piled on the table, a mountain of white paper that represented my deepest fears. I looked at the text, a wonderful announcement about Dominic. They were going to celebrate him, probably announce another handout while I was drowning. I typed back a simple reply. "We'll be there, I have something to discuss as well." The country club dining room was my mother's favorite battlefield. It was all beige carpets, heavy silverware, and hushed, judgmental whispers. It was where she felt most powerful. My father, Max, sat at the head of the table, beaming. My mother, Rebecca, was seated to his right, wearing a silk dress that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. And then there was Dominic and his new wife, glowing, tanned, and insufferable. I, on the other hand, had not slept. I had spent the week juggling my job, Nathan's recovery, and my investigation. I hadn't bothered with makeup, and I wore a simple black pantsuit. I knew my appearance was a silent act of defiance against my mother's presentable command. "Lydia, you made it," my mother said, her smile tight as she air-kissed the space near my cheek. "How is Nathan?" She said his name as if it were a distasteful word. "He's recovering." "Slowly," I said, my voice flat. I sat down and placed my large, worn-work handbag firmly on the table. "Well, that's good," my father boomed, oblivious. "Now, to the good news. As you all know, your mother and I have always believed in Dominic, and his new wife has been such a wonderful influence." Dominic preened, patting his wife's hand. "Dominic has a brilliant new idea, an import-export business," Max continued. "And his mother and I are going to provide the seed capital to get it off the ground. We're making him a full partner in the family enterprise." His wife giggled. "Max and Rebecca have just been so generous. They're transferring the seed money tomorrow. We're just so grateful that they know how to take care of real family." The jab was so obvious, so venomous it hung in the air. My mother smiled, a look of smug satisfaction. I took a slow sip of water. "That's quite an announcement," I said, my voice cutting through the celebratory chatter. "A new business. That sounds expensive, especially after the wedding, and the honeymoon, and the watches." My father laughed nervously. "You have to spend money to make money, Lydia. You, of all people, should know that." "I do," I said. "I also know that to spend money, you have to have money, and you told me, Dad, that you were tapped out." The table went silent. My mother's smile faltered. "Lydia, this is hardly the time or place for your financial worries. We are celebrating your brother." "I'm not worried, Mom. I'm just confused," I said, leaning forward. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a single piece of paper. I slid it across the table to my father. It was the bank statement from my trust account, the one showing the large, recent withdrawal. "I was reviewing my portfolio," I said, my voice calm and clear, "and I noticed this rather large transaction. A withdrawal from the trust grandfather set up for me. It's funny, I don't remember signing for it." My father's face went white. He stared at the paper, his hand trembling slightly. "What is this, Max?" my mother snapped, snatching the paper from him. She scanned it. Her eyes widened just for a second before narrowing into slits. "I don't know what you're implying," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I'm not implying anything," I said, pulling a second piece of paper from my bag. It was the forged withdrawal slip. I placed it next to her plate. "I'm stating a fact. That is my name. That is not my signature. That is theft." Dominic, who had been watching this like a tennis match, suddenly sat up. "Theft? That's a strong word, Lydia. Dad, what is this?" "Max," my mother hissed, her eyes boring into her husband. My father crumpled. He couldn't meet my gaze. It was for the wedding, Lydia," he stammered. "We were short on the deposit for the venue. I thought you would understand. It was for your brother. I was going to pay it back." "You thought I would understand," I repeated, my voice rising, drawing the attention of the tables nearby. "You stole my money for his wedding, and then 3 weeks later, when my husband was in critical condition, you told me you were tapped out." "Now, listen here," my mother cut in, her face a mask of fury. She grabbed the slip. This is a family matter. It was a loan, a simple administrative error. You are making a scene over nothing. A scene, I laughed, a harsh, dry sound. A forged signature is a felony, Mom, not an error. And that's just the beginning. My mother's eyes widened. She had thought this was my only card. She had underestimated me. What are you talking about? My father whispered, his face ashen. I'm talking, I said, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear, about the consulting fees. The tens of thousands of dollars you've been funneling from your company to Dominic for his startups. The ones you've been writing off as business expenses. I looked directly at my father. That's not seed capital, Dad. That's tax fraud. My father looked like he'd been punched. Dominic's new wife stared at him, her manicured hand frozen on her champagne glass. You're lying, Dominic stammered, his charm evaporating. You're just jealous. You've always been jealous of me. Am I said. I reached into my bag one last time and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Here are the invoices, Dominic, the ones you submitted for market research while you were actually in Ibiza. And here, I said, sliding another document to my father, is the business loan you took out for the wedding, collateralized against the equipment your employees need to do their jobs. How long did you think you could hide this from the IRS? From your own partners? My mother stood up so fast her chair screeched on the floor. You, she seethed, pointing a shaking finger at me. You did this. You went snooping through our private files. You are trying to destroy this family. Destroy this family? I stood up to face her, my voice finally breaking with the full force of my betrayal. You destroyed it. You destroyed it when you spent a fortune on him, I motioned to Dominic, and told me my husband wasn't blood. You destroyed it when you let him, I pointed to my father, steal from me to pay for it. You were so busy protecting your bloodline that you forgot I was your blood, too. And you forgot I was the only one smart enough to keep your entire, corrupt house of cards from falling. The entire restaurant was silent. My father was speechless. Dominic looked physically ill. My mother looked at me. Her face contorted with a hatred I had never seen. You will regret this, Lydia. You are out. You are done. You will not see another penny from this family ever again. That's fine, I said, picking up my handbag. I don't want your pennies. I want my money, the money you stole. You have 24 hours to transfer the full amount, plus interest, back into my account. And if we don't, my mother challenged, her voice low. I smiled, a thin, cold smile. Then this envelope, I tapped the manila folder, goes to the IRS. And this one, I held up the forged slip, goes to the district attorney, your choice. I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving them sitting in the ruins of their celebration. The following 24 hours were the longest of my life. I sat at our kitchen table, tending to Nathan, who was now awake and aware, though groggy. I had explained the basics to him. He just held my hand, his grip weak but firm. You're amazing, he'd whispered, and terrifying. My phone was silent. No calls, no texts, no notifications of a wire transfer. My parents were calling my bluff. They thought I was still their timid daughter, that I wouldn't dare pull the trigger. The morning of the deadline, I received a call from an unknown number. It was my parents' lawyer. Lydia, he said, his voice slick and condescending. Your parents have informed me of your accusations. This is a severe family misunderstanding. Your father borrowed that money, and he will pay it back. Your threats, however, constitute extortion. If you release any of those documents, we will press charges. They were playing hardball. My stomach churned, but I held my ground. It's not extortion to report a crime, I said calmly. And a borrowing requires permission. What he did was forgery and theft. And the consulting fees are tax fraud. You know it, and I know it. The clock is ticking. I hung up. The bravado was one thing, the reality was another. Was I really willing to send my own father to jail? The doubt must have shown on my face. What is it? Nathan asked. They're threatening me with extortion, I said, my voice small. They're bluffing, Lydia, he said, pushing himself up on his elbows. They are cornered. Your mother is too proud to let this go public. Your father is too scared. He was right. My mother cared about one thing, appearances. A public lawsuit, an IRS audit, it would be her social ruin. But the afternoon came and went. Still nothing. My resolve began to waver. Maybe they were just going to let it all burn down. Then, at 4:50 p.m., 10 minutes before the banks closed, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was from Dominic's new wife. He's a fraud. Your father's company is a mess. He lied to me. He said Dominic was a partner, not a parasite. I'm leaving him. I have copies of other invoices. The ones from before I was in the picture. He's been doing this for years. You want them? My heart hammered in my chest. This was the one thing I hadn't counted on. The protégé turning. She wasn't loyal to the bloodline. She was loyal to the bottom line. And she had just realized the bottom line was empty. Yes, I texted back. Minutes later, my email pinged. It was a treasure trove. Invoices, bank statements, even emails between Dominic and my father discussing how to hide the expenses. She had been building her own escape hatch all along. This wasn't just my father enabling his son. This was a conspiracy between them. The full, shocking extent of the deception was staggering. They had defrauded the company, and by extension my father's business partners, of hundreds of thousands of dollars over a decade. My phone rang again. This time it was Dominic. He was sobbing. Lydia, you have to stop. She's leaving me. She said you're going to the police? You can't. It was all Dad's idea. He told me to do it. He said it was creative accounting. He told you to forge my signature? I asked, my voice cold as ice. No, that was Mom, he whimpered. The venue deposit was due. Mom found the trust documents in your old desk. She said you owed it to the family. She said you'd never even notice. The final piece. My mother, Rebecca, she was the architect of it all. My father was the hand, but she was the brain. It's over, Dominic, I said. No, wait, he pleaded. I'll give you my wedding money, the money for the new business. It's all in my account. Max just transferred it. I'll give it all to you. Just don't tell the IRS. Please, Lydia, don't ruin my life. The desperation was pathetic. He was willing to sell out our parents to save himself. It's not enough, I said. The money you have is not the money you stole. I hung up and looked at Nathan. His eyes were wide. She was the one, I whispered. My mother. The betrayal was so deep, so complete, it felt like I was falling. But as I looked at the new evidence on my screen, I didn't feel weak. I felt cold, I felt strong. This was no longer a family dispute. This was a criminal case, and I had all the evidence. The showdown was set for Sunday. Not at the club, but at my parents' house, my mother's inner sanctum. She had called, her voice devoid of all emotion, and said, "Bring your files, we will settle this, as a family." It was a trap, I knew it. She was going to try to intimidate me, to guilt me, to destroy the evidence. What she didn't know was that I wasn't coming alone. I arrived at 2 p.m. I walked into the immaculate living room, the one I was never allowed to play in as a child. My mother, Rebecca, was sitting on her white sofa, perfectly composed. My father, Max, stood by the fireplace, looking haggard. Dominic was on a love seat, his head in his hands. Lydia, my mother said, her voice like glass. You have caused enough damage. Give me the envelope. We will transfer your trust money back, and this all goes away. It's a little late for that, Mom, I said, remaining standing. Don't be dramatic, she snapped. Your father made a mistake. He's your father. You will not destroy him over this. He didn't make a mistake, I said, my voice filling the quiet room. You all made a choice. You chose to steal from me. You chose to lie. You chose to value a party more than my husband's health. He is not blood, she shrieked, her composure finally cracking. He is an outsider. This is our money, our family. And what am I, Mom? I asked, stepping forward. Am I not your blood? You betrayed us, my father interjected, his voice hoarse. Snooping, blackmailing. Blackmailing, I repeated. I call it an audit. Give me the files, Lydia. my mother commanded, standing up. Now. I can't, I said simply. I don't have them. My father and mother exchanged a look of pure, panicked confusion. Dominic looked up. What do you mean you don't have them? Max sputtered. I mean, I already gave them to someone, I said. Someone who is much more interested in them than I am. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. My mother froze. Who is that? We're not expecting anyone. Oh, but I am, I said. I believe they're for you, Dad. My father walked, as if in a trance, to the front door. He opened it. Standing on the porch were two men in dark suits. They were not smiling. Mr. Maxwell, one of them said, his voice flat. I'm Agent Harris, and this is Agent Lee. IRS criminal investigation. May we come in? We have some questions about a series of wire transfers from your business account. My father's leg seemed to give out. He gripped the door frame for support. My mother let out a sound, a high-pitched, strangled gasp. She turned to me, her face a mask of disbelief and pure hatred. You didn't. I did, I said, my voice shaking but clear. And that's not all. The doorbell rang again. This time, two uniformed police officers were standing behind the IRS agents. We're here, one of the officers said, looking past my father, for a Ms. Rebecca and Mr. Maxwell. We've received a formal complaint regarding bank fraud and forgery, along with a full confession from a witness. Dominic shot up from the couch. What? No, I didn't confess. Not you, Dominic, I said. I looked at my mother. I was able to get in touch with your wedding planner, the one you stiffed on the final bill. She was more than happy to provide a sworn affidavit that you told her, explicitly, that you had full control of my trust and would be using it for the deposit. She kept the emails. My mother, for the first time in her life, was silent. She looked at the IRS agents. She looked at the police officers. She looked at me. The reality of what I had done, the public, social, and legal ruin, crashed down on her. The agent spoke again. Mr. Maxwell, Ms. Maxwell, we need you to come with us. Daman looked, his face pale with terror. He saw his seed money, his partnership, his entire subsidized life evaporating. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. I just stared back, my face hard. As the officers stepped inside to escort my parents out, my father finally looked at me. There was no anger, just a look of profound, pathetic defeat. But my mother, Rebecca, was composed again. As they led her past me, she stopped. She leaned in close, her perfume washing over me. You are no daughter of mine, she whispered, her voice filled with venom. You're right, I whispered back. I'm Nathan's wife, and he is my family. I watched them walk out of the house they loved more than me, the public spectacle of their downfall just beginning. The house of cards had fallen. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The IRS investigation, fueled by the evidence I and Dominic's ex-wife provided, was swift. They uncovered years of fraud. My father's business partners, furious at the deception and the risk he had exposed them to, sued him. The company was forced into receivership and eventually liquidated to pay the massive tax liens and fines. My father, Max, in exchange for his testimony against my mother, received a lighter sentence, 5 years of probation and community service. He lost everything. My mother, Rebecca, was not so lucky. The combination of the forgery, the wire fraud, and her clear role as the mastermind earned her a 2-year prison sentence. Her social world vanished overnight. Her friends treated her like a pariah. The day she was sentenced, she stared at me in the courtroom, her eyes empty. She had built her entire world on a lie, and the truth had cost her everything. Dominic, in a desperate attempt to save himself, had cooperated fully. He avoided jail time but was left with nothing, no trust fund, no seed money, and a reputation that made him unemployable. His wife, true to her word, had filed for divorce the day after the confrontation and was long gone. Last I heard, he was living in a studio apartment, working a retail job. As for me and Nathan, the road was long. The money I recovered from my trust, which my parents were forced to pay back immediately to avoid further charges, covered all of Nathan's medical bills, and gave us a cushion. With the stress of the money gone, Nathan focused on his recovery. He healed. It took months, but his strength returned, and so did his passion. He went back to his drafting table, and his small firm began to slowly, but surely, take on clients. The legal battles were draining, but we got through them. I left my job, tired of the corporate world, and started my own small financial planning practice, specializing in helping people who had been financially exploited. My name, once whispered in scandal, became a quiet symbol of resilience. About a year after the sentencing, I got a letter. It was from my father. It was short, just a few lines. He didn't apologize for the money, he didn't apologize for the lies. But he did write, "I am sorry I let your mother turn me against your husband. He is a good man, you were a good daughter." It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't a reconciliation, but it was something I never wrote back. We moved out of the city. We bought a small house upstate, one with a yard and big windows. Nathan designed a beautiful studio for himself in the back. Our lives became quiet, defined not by wealth or appearances, but by the simple, steady act of choosing each other every day. Sometimes I think about that night at the country club, the feel of the manila envelope in my bag. I had gone in wanting justice for my husband. I had walked out having dismantled an entire toxic dynasty. My mother was right about one thing: blood is powerful. She just never realized that the person who shared her blood would be the one to hold her accountable. We had found our peace, not by inheriting a legacy, but by building our own.